David Rice, an ordinary adolescent, lives with his violent father, Will, in a tiny rural Michigan town at the beginning of the film. The relationship between David's father and son has not been good since his mother left when he was 5 years old. The teenager uses school as a means of escaping his dysfunctional family. Though he doesn't have many friends, he harbors a crush on Millie Harris, one of his classmates. He gives her a snow globe one day after school that has a little model of the Eiffel Tower in it. It is totally adored by Millie, who aspires to travel the world. But Mark, the school bully, breaks up their intimate moment. He tosses the snow globe into the middle of the frozen Huron River and makes fun of David for being a geek. Despite Millie's warning, David moves in the direction of the globe, determined to get it back. However, the ice beneath his feet abruptly fractures when he scoops it up. David is dragged away from the icy water by the current after he falls in. When he makes an attempt to get to the surface, he is suddenly pulled from the water and deposited in the center of a nearby public library. Shaking and bewildered, David makes the decision to disregard the incident and head back home. His father starts berating him for being late to school right away. However, the youngster doesn't feel like having a fight and leaves to go to his room without saying anything to his father. After that, he cowers in a corner and locks the room. Before long, a vengeful Will starts shoving the door. David vanishes again and reappears at the library just as he is ready to charge in. It's at this point that he starts to realize that he could actually be able to teleport. He makes the decision to put his theory to the test by focusing intently. Astonished, he suddenly appears in his room, just minutes after disappearing moments before. Realizing that this is his best opportunity to get away from his violent father, David decides to start over, so he takes his savings and flees. But first, he makes a visit to Millie's home to drop off the snow globe and let her know he's still alive. After that, David relocates to the city, checks into a rundown motel room, and starts exploring his abilities. His first several crashes occur at a nearby park, when he collides with a tree. He gradually learns how to use it, though, by paying close attention to images of the destinations he wishes to see. David's first visit is to the Empire State Building, where he remembers his mother Mary with nostalgia. After a few weeks, the adolescent is prepared to use his abilities to the fullest. David is aware at this point that he can only teleport to locations in his mind. So he goes to a bank and, while feigning to use the restroom, sneaks a peek into the vault. Then at night he teleports inside the vault to steal money-filled sacks. When the bank learns of the robbery the next morning, the police are called to investigate. Afterwards, the establishment is visited by an enigmatic individual going by the name of Roland, who announces that the National Security Agency would be looking into the case. He has worked with situations similar to this before and is aware that there are individuals known as jumpers who possess the ability to teleport. Really, he's positive that this was done by one of them. After 8 years, the picture changes to David leading the greatest life possible. He owns an opulent mansion in New York that is stocked with pricey items. Now that he is an adult, he possesses remarkable mastery over his abilities. He can effortlessly teleport anywhere in the globe because to the numerous photos of famous locations on his walls. He teleports to London one evening and walks into a neighborhood bar. David now uses his skill for little else since he's become so comfortable with it. He disappears into the bar to get near to a pretty female who is sitting by herself. Griffin O'Connor, another jumper who is in the tavern, notices his negligence. However, David ignores it entirely and walks out with the girl in a nonchalant manner. In another scene, Roland has cornered a jumper in Brazil's tropical forests. When the small child tries to disappear, he gets entangled in a web of wires that prevents him from teleporting again and keeps electrocuting him. Roland's identity as a paladin, a sect of fervent religious followers who have traditionally hunted down jumpers, is subsequently made clear. The paladins consider superhumans to be monstrous creatures. Roland takes no time in killing the child, and a few moments later he receives a call regarding a fresh lead in the bank heist investigation. When the scene returns to New York, David goes back to his flat. Unexpectedly, he discovers Roland there, but he doesn't know who he is. Roland responds to the teenager's attempt to eject him by striking him with a special baton that shocks him with 1,000 volts of electricity. Because of this, David is unable to teleport more than a few feet within the flat. Following a tussle, David is able to teleport into a secret compartment in his wall following a fight. After that, he disappears into the room with a bag of cash. However, the seasoned paladin isn't about to give up and sends his henchmen to every location where David typically jumps. Additionally, he discovers an old photo of Millie in the cabinet, which inspires a crafty thought. David makes an appearance at his former Michigan room in the interim. Following an uncomfortable encounter with his father, he visits Millie's home. He learns there from her mother that Millie works at the neighborhood tavern across the street. When the young man sees his boyhood crush there, he instantly feels like a coward. As David tries to get away without being seen, he runs into an adult Mark. The latter recognizes him right away and starts asking him a lot of questions. Millie, who joins the two men seconds later, overhears his anger. She discloses that she was waiting for David to say anything when she saw him when he came. Mark becomes envious of her and tries to approach her, but David stops him in his tracks. Then there's a full-on brawl, and while no one is looking, they're both teleported away. They quickly emerge within the bank vault that David has long since robbed. Then, as a kind of punishment, he leaves Mark in the vault after threatening him and leaping away. David then goes back to the bar and, at last, strikes up a conversation with Millie. She admits that she gave up on her travel ambitions after realizing the necessity of having a job. However, David pretends to be a banker in order to imply that he is well off. She gladly accepts his invitation to travel to Rome with him after that. They are unaware that Griffin has been tracking David's movements and has heard their scheme. Mark, meantime, has been taken into custody by the authorities on robbery charges. Before long, posing as a CIA agent, Roland shows up at the police station. He questions Mark and asserts that he accepts his ludicrous tale. The latter then goes into detail about David and Millie, the girl he is crushing on. Roland recognizes her immediately upon hearing this because it's the same girl whose picture he discovered in David's cabinet. He then orders his guys to find out where she is. He quickly learns that she has recently departed for Rome and sent his soldiers to pursue her. David and Millie land in Rome 10 hours later and check into an opulent hotel. Later they walk outside and take in the splendor of the city. As the two explore the Colosseum in the following scene, David tries to go to the lower level. At this point he unintentionally runs into Griffin. David, who is stunned, tries to get away, but the man teleports right in front of him. He goes on to say that there are jumpers everywhere in the world that are just like them. Griffin then chastises David for his thoughtless jumping. He claims that the novice has attracted the wrong kind of attention. As everything is going on, some paladins enter the Colosseum and begin pursuing the boys. David is struck with a baton right away and rendered motionless. However, Griffin appears to be more knowledgeable of the enemy's strategies. In an instant, he teleports off and swiftly takes down each of them individually. He assists David in gathering his intelligence after the threat finally passes. Griffin goes on to describe the Paladin organization, which hunts jumpers similar to them before vanishing once more. A Colosseum staff member abruptly appears and discovers multiple unconscious bodies. When she cries out for assistance, David quickly dives into the gap that Griffin's teleportation created. He soon appears in a covert location in Egypt's dunes. Griffin is enraged to see him and reminds him that he left Millie alone. After realizing his error, David dashes back to the Colosseum. Sadly though, the cops are already waiting outside and take them both into custody. The Italian officials are still attempting to question David 8 hours later. Until the American embassy magistrate shows up, they are unable to formally make an arrest. David is shocked to learn that this magistrate is actually his mother, Mary, when she eventually appears. She takes off his restraints and orders him to flee before he can comprehend what is occurring. She alerts him to the impending arrival of more paladins. When a bewildered David tries to follow her, a police officer blocks his path. He then teleports to the waiting area and informs Millie that, following the exhaustive inquiry, he was just allowed go. David encourages her to trust him and drives her to the airport despite her doubts that things can be this simple. When they arrive, Millie questions why they're running because everything seems to be going well and wants an explanation. But David just tells her that they can't be together any longer without providing any other information. She boards the plane and travels alone to Michigan after feeling deceived. David discovers that Griffin searches down paladins in order to kill them when he arrives at his hiding place a little while later. Griffin says that these bad guys are after their type, which is why he's acting in this way. They will attack their loved ones if they are unable to obtain a jumper since they are so nasty. David becomes concerned about his abusive father, who is by himself at home after learning this. But because Millie is currently on a lengthy travel, he is aware that she is safe. When David returns to his former house in the following scene, he discovers his father lying dead on the floor. It transpired that Roland had already visited him. David is devastated by this and at last understands how much his reckless behavior has cost him. He needs to catch Roland before Millie lands in the United States, so he doesn't have time to grieve. Then, a furious David teleports back to Griffin's lair and attempts to steal his diary, which has extensive research on paladins, including the one that killed his father, by taking it. Griffin, however, forbids him, stating that Roland is extremely dangerous and should not be treated lightly. David suggests that because they have no other choice than to work together to beat him. Griffin initially says he would rather work alone and declines. However, the inexperienced person eventually gets his wish when he persists. The two of them then teleport to the airport in Michigan, but it's too late. Millie has already touched down and taken off. David becomes frightened by this and rushes to the pub where she used to work right away. When he asks around about Millie, a waitress tells him that another man who seems intriguing has also been looking for her. David instantly teleports to Millie's place after realizing it must be Roland. He is relieved to find her unharmed and tries to explain why he showed up in her flat without warning. However, she still feels badly about what happened in Rome, and she is unwilling to meet him at all. David swiftly grabs Millie and brings her to Griffin's hiding place as Roland and his men approach at this same moment. The experienced jumper is incensed by this since he is aware that the paladins possess a device that enables them to create wormholes on the scars left by the leaps. Regretfully, Roland and his men arrive with the device and carry out Griffin's worst fears. The guys hide in a hidden cave while they await the opening of the wormhole. There, by happenstance, David learns that Mary, a fellow paladin, is also a subject of Griffin's investigation. David is about to confront his fellow jumper when Roland appears and quickly uses his electrical cables to grab him. Griffin uses a flamethrower to cut the cables as he goes to kill the youngster. Roland is then forcefully pushed back into the portal by him. The two are still fighting at Millie's apartment. Confusion-stricken Millie cuts the wires to save David in the interim. However, she forces him to swear that once they get home, he will leave her alone. Although he accepts, David also admits that she has been his one and only love since they were little. While the two are having a passionate chat, Griffin unexpectedly shows up with the paladin's machine. But Roland catches Millie with a hook he launches from the jump scar. Just as the scar closes, he drags her back to the apartment. Griffin starts getting ready to bring a remote-controlled bomb to the residence following this occurrence. He doesn't care if Millie perishes in the course of eliminating every paladin once and for all. David abruptly teleports with the bomb and drops it at the Colosseum because he doesn't want to lose his love. Griffin follows him right away, and a battle breaks out between them for the detonator. They travel the entire globe by teleportation before arriving at a Chechmian battleground. Griffin gets the detonator while ignoring the fighting going on around them. However, David leaps on him at that same moment and pushes him up against a pylon that is highly charged. The experienced jumper is thus trapped for some time. After winning, David teleports back to Millie's apartment, where he discovers her bound to the wall. Without thinking, he charges in to save her, but Roland strikes him with an electric baton. The paladin then uses different electric cables for each of his limbs to tie him on top of Millie. Roland believes that David won't be able to escape because of the current flowing through the wires. At this pivotal point, Millie acknowledges her affection for David and apologizes for misjudging everything. This provides him with the necessary backing to advance his abilities. All of a sudden, the room is transported to the center of the Huron River and vanishes from the building. Underwater, David experiences vertigo, so Millie swims to his rescue. David is moved enough by her passionate kiss to transfer them to the former library. Roland appears in the library as well after swimming into the jump scar. However, a few seconds later, David lunges at him and the two leave the area. The two adversaries are in a cave in the middle of the Grand Canyon when the scene changes. David makes the observation that Roland is a nice man because he had the option to leave Roland in the ocean with sharks. The paladin is left behind in the isolated cave as he suddenly disappears. Many days later, David finally finds his mother in a snowy place by following expected clues about her. Mary acknowledges that she left him because she was aware of his abilities in response to his demands for explanations about what is happening. She goes on to say that although she really loved David, all she can do is give him a head start. David leaves the area after learning this since he believes his mother is with the enemy. After that, he meets Millie, and they both teleport to a warmer location.